All right, welcome back to the Zag Talk podcast. I'm joined this week by one of my co-hosts, Brian Mary. So myself and Brian are doing a little bit of recap since the Zags went on a break for a little while. We also have gone on a break for a little while, enjoyed the holidays, spent some time with family. For Brian and Carson, that's one and the same. But got to spend a little time together, which is really nice with our families and spend a little time away from Gonzaga basketball as the players, due to COVID pause, the team also had to cancel a couple of games, postpone a couple of games. We'll see if they end up getting made up. Just finally got back into action this past weekend with the game against Pepperdine. First WCC action for the Zags after our last game against University of Northern Alabama on December 28th was the last time we played a game. Played this past weekend. We'll just do a really quick recap of the Pepperdine game, and then we'll jump into a little bit of what BYU's done recently and talk about the BYU Gonzaga matchup on Thursday. So looking at the Pepperdine game, first game back, we score the most points in a WCC game in a long time. So 117-83 victory over Pepperdine. Watson leads the way in scoring with 19 points and 6 rebounds off the bench in 25 minutes. Tied straw there for the most minutes in the game with 25. We had 6 Zags scoring double figures with Watson 19, Timmy and Chet at 18 apiece, Salas at 13, and Strother and Bolton at 12. 8 Zags played double-digit minutes, the normal cast you would suspect, all of them playing 20 plus. Greg did get in there for 10, and our Arlauskis played 5, and then a couple of the end of the bench guys got in as well towards the end of the game. And I believe either Matt Lang or Will Graves, I can't remember which, did get the fans tacos as well. So we did get to the 10 three-pointers mark that game. As a whole, team shot 40% from 3. So that's a good upwards trend for us. 74% of the line from the line, both above our 69% average from the free throw line. Nice. And our 35% average from 3 on the season. So the only takeaway that I've seen that you could, like, as a outsider say, and I think it is a decently fair point, is 83 points given up to Pepperdine. Their season average is 70. Any worries there, Brian, with anything that came out of that game?
Typically, I might be a little worried, but what I will say is that according to KenPom, this is the fastest game, and by fastest, that's measured by number of total possessions. Fastest game in the history of Gonzaga basketball in the KenPom era. So what I would say is, if we were in the 70 possession range, I'd be a little bit concerned that we're giving up 83 points to Pepperdine. That was not the case. We had 90 possessions. Both teams had 90 possessions, which is insane, right? It's a pretty incredible number. So I think where I am a little concerned is in where we gave up those points. So we allowed them to shoot 37% from 3. This is a team that has basically zero offensive flow, as evidenced by just crazy shots that they took early in the shot clock. It ultimately ended up being we ended up holding them to 0.92 points per possession, which is really not bad. It could be a lot worse. And actually, if you take a look at when the game went, quote unquote, analytically final, according to Haslam metrics, the game was essentially over at the 15:44 mark in the second half. And at that point, we were giving up even less points per possession. I believe Carson sent this to us in our group text. We were giving up 0.88 points per possession while scoring 1.3 points per possession. In that regard, again, not concerned at all at the total amount of points given up. I think that if we can hold teams to below 0.92, 0.95 points per possession and still maintain a high level of scoring on our end, which is what we did in that game. I mean, I'm not concerned with the total amount of points. One last note: when the game did go analytically final, the score was 80-44. So, giving up 44 points in 25 minutes, I'll take it. So that's my 2 cents.
Yeah, I think all in all, a really good game. Couple of guys to highlight. I think Salas with the 13 off the bench is a really, really solid number for him. Ups his scoring averages a little bit. And then I think the team as a whole shooting 40% from three is also a really nice turn as well. As it's not something that's necessarily been this standout issue, but Carson pointed it out in the group message as well. Our percentage from three just continues to creep up as the season goes on. So that's a really positive note as well, I think, from that game.
I think one other thing that I saw, which is a welcome adjustment, at least in my view, considering our depth at the guard position, and hopefully, knock on wood, we'll get even deeper with the return of Dom Harris at some point in the future. We showed a little bit of tenacity on the defensive end. It seemed like we pressed them for a pretty decent portion of the first half, and it led to forced turnovers. I think that the team would be, very, very well off or well to do to push the pace more on the defensive end. Press up, force teams to do things that they're uncomfortable doing, make tough passes in the full court, play passing lanes. Those are things that we haven't done, and we haven't really done them, especially in the bigger games. And maybe that's well warranted. Alabama, they play very fast. I don't know what would happen if we would have pressed up on them. They might have just beat it, win, bam, boom, layups every time. Who knows? But I will say that, again, we have the depth to play that fast, to play that level of pressure defense. It's not like years past where, hey, well, if one guy gets a foul in the first few minutes, like, oh, shoot, we got to take him out because we need him for the rest of the game. Like, that's not the situation anymore. We can be a little bit more, liberal in giving guys some freedom to be aggressive on the defensive end. So that was a welcome change in my book.
I think also a welcomed turnaround, although the scoring was not there for Andrew Nembhard. He only had 3 points but he only took 3 shots. He was one of 3 from the field, one of 1 from 3. Hit his only 3 of the game, or his only basket was a 3, and it was the only 3 he took. So that was really nice. He also had 8 assists, 6 rebounds with only 3 turnovers. So good to see him getting back in the controlling form, being able to really control the flow of the game and assist his teammates, as I think we hoped he would be this season. And maybe he's not the scoring force that he may have been from the mid-range that he was last year, but a welcome improvement to the statistical line for Andrew Nembhard this game too. Before we hop into the BYU Gonzaga game on Thursday, let's quickly talk about the BYU St. Mary's game this past Saturday. So really, really brief recap before we dig into maybe some of the statistics from that game, but very low scoring affair in the Marriott Center this past weekend. So 52-43 win for the Cougars. They were down 7-0 to start the game, got the lead back at 9-7 and never lost it since. They were up 28-16 at half. They allowed 27% shooting from the Gales in the first half. So, I mean, really just a defensive game for BYU. They forced 19 turnovers, inclusive of 6 blocks and 8 steals. They had 13 turnovers. So really just a defensive game and a poor shooting game across the board by both teams. I didn't get too much of a chance to watch, to go back and rewatch the game. But on first glance, I mean, less than 30% from the field for St. Mary's, less than 40% from the field for BYU. BYU is also very low percentage from three. I think less than 10% from three. 1 of 13. Yep. 1 of 13. Yeah. So, yep. Rough game all around. From a shooting perspective, Barcelo was 0 of 5 from 3 and only had 8 points. So that was kind of the statistical box score highlights. Brian, what else you got for us from that game?
I mean, it's kind of what you would have expected. A grinded out. I mean, look, both teams are in the top 20 in defensive efficiency, according to KenPom. This game is exactly what you would have expected from that. Additionally, I believe both teams are Both teams are top 10 in 3-point field goal percentage allowed. So that tells you where you get those really, really poor shooting numbers. BYU gives up 26.4% per game from three, and St. Mary's ended up shooting 17%, right? On St. Mary's end, let's see, what did they give up? They give up a really, really low percentage as well. I think they're 30. They give up 32% from three per game. But ultimately, I mean, it's exactly like you would have expected, and extremely ugly, not fun to watch at all. But I think that there were a few things that we kind of are able to glean a little bit from this game and how this game went. St. Mary's leading scorer was Matthias Toss. He only had 13 points, granted, but he was actually the leading scorer in the game. I think that tells you exactly where BYU's weaknesses are. They don't have a guy in the starting lineup taller than, I believe, give me 1 second.
6'9". I was just looking at it. I got it listed on my own notes. 6'9".
Who is that? Caleb Lohner?
Yeah. I guess of guys that play, I think they technically have a bench guy that's like 6'11", but guys that play, I think they're 6'9".
Right. Yeah. So, that's kind of the thing. I mean, Matthias Toss is a 7-footer, and he was able to kind of, eat him up a little bit in there. So I think that shows you where their glaring weakness is. That's kind of forced Fus Traore, a freshman out of Wasatch Academy, who is, former teammate of Nolan Hickman. Fun fact. It's forced him to have to kind of play more inside on the defensive end. He's only 6'6", which isn't short, but it's not, the level of size that you would want in order to compete inside at a high level for Division I basketball. He's been really tough in there, but even still, it makes it tough having, maybe a 3 or 4 inch height disadvantage every game at the 4 and the 5 spot. So that's really my big takeaway, is that St. Mary's bigs were able to push guys around. And I think that could be a sign of things to come in the game coming up on Thursday.
I mean, BYU's been slapped around by injuries this year. It really sucks, to see them, A, do well, but also B, know that they're not even playing at their full potential. I believe they've lost 2 guys during the season to season-ending injuries, on top of starting the season with at least one guy out, who I believe is still out. I don't remember all the names, but they've really struggled with some of the injury bug this year. So the 6'9" starters is, I guess, not really by design per se. Although as I'm looking at the rest of the roster, I mean, Ali Atiki is also 6'9". Caleb Lohner 6'8", and then you've got Gavin Baxter at 6'9". So, I mean, there's really not a lot of height on this team. They're going to get pushed around inside, I think.
Well, and Gavin Baxter is the guy who's out for the year. He's actually had season-ending injuries the last 4 years, which really, really sucks. But anyway, I
exactly.
Go ahead.
So, I mean, no. I mean, I think that's it. I think, they've really been hit hard this year. They don't have an inside presence. Although I will give them credit, when they got the mismatches, both Lohner and Ali Atiki were able to work in the paint to get some inside buckets. So they were able to score inside. I think you mentioned Traore at the top. I think he's really been killing it on the offensive boards. He's averaging like 3 a game, almost 8 total from the field, or almost 8 total rebounds a game. So, I mean, he is their quote unquote big man, but I mean, he's not anything incredibly intimidating. What do you have down as, what do the Zags have to do to not lose to BYU? I say not lose right now. Evan Miyakawa's game predictor has Gonzaga winning at 84-68. So it's not a close predicted margin of victory. What do the Zags have to do to ensure that is the case come Thursday?
This is a tough question. Thinking back to our games against BYU last year, I mean, we smacked them around in the first meeting with them. In the WCC championship game during the WCC tournament, they kind of smacked us around in the first half a little bit. And the way that they did that was actually getting Drew Timme in some really unfavorable mismatches and forcing us to collapse in order to guard a rolling Matt Harms. And, I would have said, if we didn't have the personnel that we have now, I would have said that would probably be my biggest concern, would be unfavorable mismatches with Drew Timme having to play defense out on the perimeter. The way that we will lose this game, if that outcome happens, it would require us to give up at least 40% from three, and they would have to shoot a lot. What's probably going to happen if this is the case is, we get to maybe 15 minutes left in the game, and every Zag fan in existence goes, "Oh boy, this is Alabama all over again." If by the end of the first half they've made 10 threes, like, we are in trouble, just plain and simple. I think that the other way that we lose this game is if we miss our free throws. Again, shades of Alabama. As a matter of fact, BYU is one of the stats, the superlative stats, and what we see in KenPom is that they give up a lot of free throws. They're 200th in the country in free throw attempts per field goal attempt, which is or free throw rate. So basically, they don't let anything inside happen easily, even though they don't necessarily have a height advantage in there. So those are like two of the big key things that can happen that'll put me at a little bit of unease. On the flip side, though, there are a few things that, for me, they have me feeling good. They're giving me good vibes. Alex Barcelo, to start the year, first 11 games, he was averaging 19.7 points per game. He was shooting 52%, and he was shooting 50% from three, which is wild. The last 6 games, I would have to, in order to understand why this is, I would have to probably need to, go back and watch. But last 6 games, he's only shooting 36%. He's averaging 11 points per game instead of 19.7. He's had 0 games where he's scored more than 15 points, but he's still shooting 40% from three. So that tells me a couple of things. First of all, the kid is there's no getting around it. He's an incredible 3-point shooter, but he's not playing his best basketball right now. He's had only 2 games in the last 6 where he's scored in double figures. If he only scores 8 points against Gonzaga, other guys are going to have to step up for sure. But I just don't know who they have that are going to be able to do that. So, I don't know. What do you think?
I mean, for what does Gonzaga have to do to not lose to BYU? I said chase Barcelo off the 3-point line and keep him from getting hot. That's number one. I think that's going to be number one on everybody's list. I think keep Loner, Aliatiki, and Traore out of the paint, as they were able to work those mismatches, but they're able to work those mismatches against a team like St. Mary's, but I just don't see the same level of mismatches. You mentioned getting Timme onto the outside. Yeah, sure. That gives guys like George, maybe Loner, the ability to get past, Timme from the outside. But even when you get past Timme from the outside, you've got, Slender Man himself lurking on the other side of the court, able to, completely recover and contest shots at the rim, even if not block them. So I'm not super worried. I think BYU is, you mentioned at the top, a top 20 defensive team, adjusted defensive on KenPom. They're 16. Notably, they are one spot behind the Zags, who are at 15. But, they're a really good defensive team. So, we really have to take care of the ball. Can't have a bad game from Nembhard in terms of turnovers. And I hate to say that as like a talking point because, for a long time that wasn't a thing. But more recently, we've seen it can be a thing. It definitely isn't always, as evidenced by the Pepperdine game. He was able to really control the ball and be the point guard we needed him to be in that game. I'm not incredibly worried, although BYU worries me every time because, there's, Gideon George can have his night, or Loner can have his night, or Traore can have his night. I mean, the one thing is BYU has managed to win games with Barcelo only scoring, 11 points a game and shooting 40% from three. So despite the fact that he's been doing that and hasn't been playing well as an individual player, the team has managed to find a way to win games. Now, against a team like Gonzaga, that's, there's a lot less of a list of things to pick from to help you win said game. But I do think they scare me a little bit this on Thursday.
Yep. Well, one thing that I'm noticing, just trying to find patterns in BYU's 3 losses so far. And there is actually one thing that I'm noticing is it's something worth noting, right? Last year, BYU didn't have necessarily a true point guard. I mean, Averett kind of played that role. When Gideon George was on the floor, he played that role a little bit. But BYU brought in a transfer in the offseason, T. Lucas from Milwaukee. And, he is a true point guard. He averaged 14 points a game at Milwaukee and, has been a stud, right? I think he's everything that BYU has needed and more at that point guard position. And the one thing that I'm noticing in BYU's 3 losses is that on the season, T. Lucas averages, his field goal percentage average is 41%. He's shooting 41% on the season. In BYU's 3 losses to Utah Valley, Creighton, and Vanderbilt, T. Lucas shoots 26.7% or less. And so I think that kind of tells a little bit of another story. It's like, you know what, maybe Barcelo can go off. Against Creighton, Alex Barcelo had 28 points and they still lost. So maybe you can let Barcelo go off, but you got to make sure that you hold T. Lucas and maybe even, Fus Traore as well in check. A similar pattern for him as well. He shoots 52% on the season. And in the game against Utah Valley, Fus Traore was 0 for 4 from the field. Against Creighton, he was only 2 of 6, shot 33%, not awful. Against Vanderbilt, he only took 5 shots. He made 2 of them. So, and in all 3 of those games, he had less than 10 points, shot in single figures, right? So maybe it's more about the supporting cast. I don't know. Food for thought. So I don't know. Curious. Like, have you seen BYU? Have you seen BYU play? And if so, I mean, like, what's something that for you doesn't necessarily, match the stats that we see, or what's something that shows up for you that doesn't show up on the stat sheet? Because for me, it's like it's the hustle. Like Caleb Loner last year, I mean, he showed an incredible amount of hustle, right? But I'm curious what you think.
Yeah, so I will say I've only watched BYU St. Mary's this year, so I haven't had a ton of chance to watch BYU other than some highlight reels and the BYU St. Mary's game. But I will say, the first thing you said, and I hate picking the thing you just said, but I mean hustle, specifically Caleb Loner and Gideon George. I think the 2 of them last season, alongside Barcelo were, some of the better players against the, in the games where we played BYU last year. And I also think show the most potential to go off, I think. Like Traore can have a good game, but I don't see him having this like wild game that gets them the win. But like, yeah, could Gideon George all of a sudden start shooting from 3 and also attacking the basket super well and, shows a balanced game and is able to get 20 next in against the Zags? Yeah. Does he have that potential? Yes. Loner last year went off against us. I want to say in Provo. I don't remember which game he went off, but it could have been both. But, I think those 2 really have the most ability to carry a team like BYU. If you let one of those guys go off and you let Barcelo get 4 or 5 threes in this game and get hot, that's the recipe for BYU to win this game.
Yeah. No, I think you're totally right. One other guy that I think could potentially go off is a guy named Seneca Knight, who is a transfer from, he transferred to LSU. He didn't play at all, and then he transferred to BYU. But before that, he was at San Jose State. And let me tell you, he had quite the 2019-2020 season. He didn't start the season, playing super well. First 3 games, he averaged somewhere in the 8-9 point per game ballpark. The last, 15 games of the year, he averaged 22 points a game. So, granted, this is it. San Jose State, they were losing basically every game. So his mentality was probably, you know what, I'm going to go off, I'm going to get mine. But this is a guy who can explode for 37 points against a Colorado State. He can explode for 34 points at Nevada, right? So, I'd watch out for him too. I mean, he doesn't necessarily play the exact same role that he had at San Jose State, but just a guy to watch out for. Another big time transfer that Mark Pope was able to bring in this offseason.
Well, and also the other thing that scares me is it's Mark Pope. Like, how many times has he seen the Zags? He's got plenty of time to prepare for this game. And that this is the game that's circled all year on BYU's calendar, because it's BYU in the kennel. And unfortunately, that record is not as good as we'd like it to be over the last, 8 or so years. Yeah. It's a winning record. Yeah. The Zags have a winning record in the kennel against BYU, but it's not the perfect record we'd love it to be at home. So that they're going to be motivated and they're going to come out and, all cylinders firing and ready to try to upset, AP number 2 team in the country.
Yep. Yeah. The last game that I attended was senior night in the kennel, 2016. Real tough loss. That was the HBO year when HBO did the whole documentary on us and everything. Oh man. But you know what? I'm feeling good because the next game that I attend in the kennel is on Thursday. So we're gonna, exactly. I honestly, I never thought I would be back in the kennel. It's one of those things where it's like, you come out of it thinking, man, this could really be my last game in the kennel. That's what I thought. Knowing the whole season ticket thing and all that. So I'm just happy that I'm just happy that my wife drunkenly put our name in for a silent auction. So
it's one of those things, Yeah, it's one of those things where, like, if you want to get back in the kennel, you're going to find your way eventually. I say that to all the people out there who haven't had a chance to get into the kennel yet. I say that to all the people out there who might be thinking, shit, was that my last game in the kennel? No, I think you get to know the right people, and, the season ticket thing makes it hard. But, luckily there also are a lot of awesome Zags that are willing to get people tickets. I've been a beneficiary of that. I was able to help people secure tickets for the Pepperdine game on Saturday. So it is a really cool community, and I do really appreciate, all the folks that are out there to get people into their first game since they were a student or their first game ever in McCarthy. So that's been really cool to see this year.
I think you hit on a really good point. If you put in the effort, seek out the right people, it's possible to get back in there.
Well, thank you for listening to this recap episode of our Pepperdine game. A little bit of a recap for the BYU St. Mary's game. We talked about what we hope to see and hope to not see on Thursday. We have a late night game in the kennel. It's 8 p.m. tip on ESPN2 against BYU. And then we have a game on Saturday as well. Who do we have on the calendar? I don't even know that I know off the top of my head.
Looks like Santa Clara, 4 p.m.
Alrighty. So if that game happens, I know Santa Clara has been the beneficiary of a ton of COVID cancellations, but if that game happens, we'll have another game on Saturday as well. And then myself, Brian, and Carson will look to connect this weekend, do a recap episode of This Week in Gonzaga Basketball, and we'll see you then. Thanks for listening.
Go Zags.
Go Zags.